Hello everybody, my name is Karim. You probably know me from the group. I'm a senior, I'm past senior, it's my fourth year. It's my last semester, hopefully. And I've been giving the boot camps and helping out with Samuel for the past 4 years. And this is something I'm very used to, and I probably will go through it very, very quickly. So I highly advise you guys, if you have any questions or there's something that you didn't understand, go back and re-watch it. And even if you still didn't understand, you can always text me. I'm always available to answer any questions that you guys have. Okay? Perfect. So now we're going to talk about cameras. Obviously, everybody that comes into this major is thinking, ooh, I want to shoot with a camera. I want to see, how this is going to look with this cam and that cam. And you know that here at LAU, we all have, we have different types of cameras that you guys can experiment with. So I'm going to run you guys through them so that you can understand the different types of cameras and how to actually use the camera and the different parts of it to get the image that you guys want. Okay? Great. First, to get the stable, nice image that you want, you can't just be holding a camera. You need a tripod. So basically what a tripod has, we have the legs, we have the spreaders, which are those little things at the bottom to hold the legs spread evenly, and the head. The head is the most important part because it allows you to make fluid movement, and it has all these different things like panning, tilting, balance, lock. You'll see them in real life, but now just focus on knowing the different parts. Okay, so first to show you, this is a Vinton tripod. This is a very heavy-duty tripod that we use for our video cameras, which I'm going to be explaining in a bit. First, I want you guys to pay attention to these little things over here. I just want you guys to focus on these little pieces. There's two on each leg, okay? And this is basically the lock that allows you to make the tripod go up and down. Okay, so for example here, I unlocked it, and I can take it up, and it goes up. All right? It's very simple. I already have the bottom level unlocked. So quick and important rule is whenever you want to set up a tripod, start with the bottom locks. That way, if you have it up and you want to take it up even higher, you don't have to go down all the way and fix it. You can just do it from here, and then you can make it taller. Okay? All right, so. Okay, so let's say if I started from the higher dials, the higher locks, and then I took up the camera. Okay, that's fine for now. I'm happy, I got my shots. And then I want to make it taller this time. So the lock is on the bottom, so I have to go all the way back down. And it's this very inconvenient, annoying process. And I know you guys want to work the least you can until you can actually raise it higher. So it's just more efficient and more practical if we just literally start it from the bottom. Haha. So I'm gonna just do that now very quickly. Okay, after getting used to the height of your legs, you might want to take a look at this little thing over here, which is the spreader. This just keeps the legs evenly spread, and even if you wanted to go for a more terrain, difficult kind of place or location to shoot, you can use these to make the leg longer or shorter from the bottom. Yes, and so you can also remove it completely if you're shooting on a little hill or garden or something. Moving on, let's go for the head. And I'm actually going to show you without the camera on it so you can see all the little pieces. Okay, so right here, we have a lot of things that you guys need to look at. I'm just going to give you a nice little look at it. Here. Yeah, okay. So, to start off, you have the arm right here, okay? So this is the thing that you're going to be using to make any sort of camera movements, because you're not going to hold it with the camera on the head, okay? And how you can control this is with this little knob here. Just twist it, and you can kind of make it any way that you'd like. If you like to get a grip like this, you know, just lock it, and then you can control just like that. And also, if you're a lefty, I'm not going to actually do it now, but if you're a lefty, you can remove the piece here and place it here, okay? And so then you can control it with your left hand. And it's very important if like you're right-handed or left-handed to have it on the right side so that you can, like, it's more stable, let's just say, for movement, okay? All of these things that I'm talking about, you're going to be able to test them out later, so don't worry too much about it. Next, I want to go over this. Now, this is your pan lock, okay? So you unlock it by going to the left, like this, unlock, and then you can move around the tripod, the head, and if you lock it, it can't move anymore. Now, please, guys, please make sure that it's locked, that it's unlocked before you move it, because many tripods can start to break if it was locked and you just kept shifting it around so much. Like, look, this one is a bit weaker. It's completely locked and it still moves. So just be sure to unlock it so that you can move the head, okay? This applies to any knob or any kind of screw or lock or whatever. Next, we have the one that's up here, okay? This is the tilt. This allows you to tilt the head up and down. Makes sense? And same thing applies. So you turn it to the right to lock, and then I can't tilt up and down. And then if I unlock it, I can go up and down very nice and smooth. Okay? So another thing to note about these is that this tripod head actually comes with friction. These friction dials over here actually make the process much more, let's say, smooth of getting nice camera movement without having to like slow down your arm too much. So if I have it at 1, I unlock the pan, this one is for the panning, of course, and I go, it's a very normal, just based on my hand kind of movement. But if I increase the friction really high, look at what's going to happen. So I put it at 9. It becomes heavier by adding friction to the pan. And so the panning movement on the camera will become much more stable and it will look more professional. The same thing goes for our tilting. Now, the tilting one is actually over here. Yeah. So this one actually is already on the highest setting, and that's why when it was unlocked, it was going like very slowly. So if I decrease it to 1, it becomes very, yeah, that. So that's pretty much the movement. And then the thing about the head that you guys need to understand very well is actually placing your camera on it. So every camera that you want to put on a tripod has a plate, all right? And this has this little screw in the middle all the time. Now, sometimes you need to actually screw it yourself, but now we already have it installed. If you look closely at this tripod here, okay, what we have is a side lock, okay? Some tripods are slide, so you have to literally like slide the plate into the tripod, and some of them are side, where you can actually install it by placing this side on this side over here, and then clicking it down. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate that now. So you put the one that doesn't have the metal poking out, so you put it over here like this. And when you hear that click, that's how you know that the camera is installed, but that's not the whole thing yet. Now what you need to do is come over here, right here, because now the camera is not fixed yet, you see? So you need to turn this knob, and that's how you lock your camera. And now I can let go. Because if I let go like this, the camera would have slid, okay? So the next step of this after you've installed your camera is you want to balance it. Because basically, like I said, a tripod head can, get ruined over time. So for example, let's say this camera had a lot of stuff installed like on here and here and here. Like a lot of equipment goes on a camera. So it's very important to balance it properly so that it doesn't make the tripod weaker and sometimes even tip over. Because like I showed you guys, this tilt, for example, is already pretty bad. It's completely locked, yet it still moves because students don't know how to use it. So if I unlock this actually can help me balance the camera properly on the tripod just to kind of find the center of mass taba. So now it's pretty easy, just because there's nothing installed on it, and then we're good. Now the last thing you want to note when you install the camera is leveling, because you want a very straight horizontal kind of level, just to make sure that all your lines are okay. So you're going to want to come here. You see this little thing at the top of the tripod. So this is what helps you level your camera. I tried. This is what helps you level your camera. There's like a little bubble inside. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video, but you'll see it in real life, don't worry. So what you're gonna wanna do is go to the bottom of the tripod. There's gonna be this handle. Do you see it right here? So this handle right here, you go ahead and you grab it while you're holding the camera and just move to the left. And now the head is loose on the tripod. Keep holding your camera and balance it in a way where the bubble is in the little center of the guide. All right, and then you can lock it back and make sure you've locked tight. And there you go. The camera is now perfectly leveled with respect to the horizon, and all your lines will become completely straight. Okay? So, we good? Let's move on. The two main types of cameras that you guys are going to be using are one, the video camera, and two, a DSLR or mirrorless kind of camera. So these are the kind of consumer level, let's kind of say, the things that you work with most of the time, okay? And a video camera is very specific for TV, for shooting documentaries, this kind of like on-the-ground stuff. It's not made for taking pictures. So actually, I don't even think you can take stills with a video camera. You can? Yeah. Okay. So a DSLR is much more of a photography camera, but it's still very good when it comes to taking videos and stuff like that. Like I said, a video camera is made for, like documentaries, video productions, and the thing about them is that you can't change the lens like you do on a DSLR camera. And what's actually really nice is that you have more options, such as zebra, which helps you calibrate your exposure, focus peaking to make sure that, to see the area that's in focus, ND filters that come built into the camera, and so that kind of helps you when it comes to sunlight and daylight. And ND is something that's kind of like sunglasses for your camera. It's, what does it stand for?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Neutral density.
No one cares about neutral density.
You're taking cinematography, should be.
Well, I skipped classes to shoot my capstone.
Okay. Research.
And also you have audio inputs like XLR and SDI, okay? And most importantly, you also have focus peaking, which is a tool that actually shows you the area that's in focus on the screen, okay? Perfect. Now let's move on to the DSLR cameras. This also works as a video camera, like I said before, and shooting video on it replicates more what a cine camera actually looks like, such as the Red or Alexa cameras. And you can change the lenses however you'd like. You can install zoom lenses, prime lenses, some cameras even support video lenses. And the very interesting thing about it is that they don't have all the features of the video camera. But I guess it's a sort of compromise, because if you want to go for something that looks more professional for film, let's say, you can install monitors, things that, like follow focuses. These kinds of tools become external. And so this video camera might seem easier at first for something that's run and gun, but if you want like a professional kind of film style or look or anything like that, the DSLR is actually better for you. Okay? And besides that, it's also very cheap. It's more consumer based, so that anyone can buy one and go just try to shoot films or projects or whatever they want. Okay? And let's move to the basic components of a camera. All right, so I'm going to show you this based on this DSLR that I prepared here for you. This is a 7D. It's a Canon camera, obviously. And now there's a lot of things here to dissect, okay? We have, of course, this piece right here, which is the camera body. Now, this is the most famous part. Everyone goes like, wow, oh my God, what a nice camera. This is it, all right? But besides that, you have the lens, okay? Now, it's this very common thing where people are like, oh yeah, it's just a lens, you know, it just comes with a camera and that's it. But that's actually not so much the case. This specifically is a zoom lens. That means you can have many different focal lengths on one lens. It's much more suitable for travel or getting documentaries, vlogging, that kind of stuff. So,
Turn it on.
okay.
So now it's unwind.
Okay, so this, at the moment here, it says 18. I'm actually not sure if you guys can see. They can't see, no?
No.
All right, that's fine. Wait, let me...
It tilted.
Okay, perfect. All right. So, you guys see where it says 18, and there's the little line? That means that the lens at the moment is set on a focal length of 18 millimeters. Now, I can increase that to 35, for example. Okay? I can make it into 50, all the way up to 135. Okay? And that's kind of the magic of a zoom lens, is that it's just better in general for, you know, all-around kind of filmmaking and video capturing. But the thing about it is that it doesn't capture every focal length perfectly. All right, so besides the lens, there is a piece inside of the camera body that is called a shutter. Okay, a shutter is literally something that, okay, so you have your sensor right here, and the shutter is what clicks. So you know the sound. See, that was the shutter. It basically captures the image or the light or whatever you want to call. And so besides the shutter, we have the sensor. Can you hear that?
Hold on.
Okay, don't do this at home. I'm just showing this to you for educational reasons. All right, so behind the lens, I'm about to remove it off the camera body. Okay. This bad boy
Click the record.
in there. Okay, so that bad boy right there, this is your sensor. This is a very sensitive piece, and please don't speak around it. Don't go and blow inside or anything, because this is the piece that actually takes the place. Sorry. Okay. So this is the piece that takes the place of film, okay? Because old cameras were made so that light goes through the lens and hits the film, you know, the piece of film, like the film reel. And so in the digital age, that has been replaced by little chips called sensors. And that's the thing that you guys just saw. I'm going to talk more about each piece later. Okay, and finally, we have the storage medium, which is, for this camera, your SD card. Okay, I'm sure all of you have seen SD cards. Yep, just get some nice focus on there. All right, so this is a 64 gig SD card, and it has a very nice data rate of up to 300 megabytes per second, which is important to capturing high quality video at the best quality, high quality video. Okay, so basically each camera has a different kind of storage medium that it prefers. So it just happens that on this camera, this 7D, it's an SD card. And so when we come here to the video camera, interestingly enough, it has this other storage device called S/S card. Now, Sony actually made this specifically for their cameras because they're greedy and rich. And it doesn't work on anything else except for their cameras. Okay? So you just get the card and put it over here in A. Why is it not going there? Okay. Cool. Nice. Okay, that's great. So let's move on. To get into more specifics when it comes to a lens, you have to, and I know this chart kind of looks a little bit difficult, but it's just about very simple physics and optics, okay? So what happens is the light enters the lens to hit the sensor like I explained before. But depending on, let's say now, the focal length, that kind of impacts how the sensor sees the light that's hitting it, okay? So to kind of demonstrate this, let me show you guys actually live on this DSLR. So the most important thing that you want to consider when you're talking about a lens is its focal length. A focal length is basically the distance between the center of the lens and the part where it focuses, which is the sensor. You don't have to understand exactly what that means, but what you have to understand is that it's measured in millimeters, and basically when you go from like less than 35, that is considered a wide angle lens. When you go from like 35 to 75 millimeter, that will be like a normal lens. And if you go higher than 75, that is considered telephoto, okay? Now what these terms mean is something that's like very much dependent on me explaining it now on the camera, and you guys will see. But very generally, wider means you can see more things from around the camera, and telephoto is more like closer on one item or one object, okay? I'm gonna show you now on the DSLR. I set it up just like this so you guys can understand. And most of all, when it comes to this little exercise, I want you guys to pay attention to something which I'm gonna explain. So here is an 18 millimeter, okay? And I'm gonna take it up now to 35, and it kind of, for you, it's just like, oh yeah, I zoomed in, but the thing is, I didn't remove any resolution, any light, any sort of quality from it. So if I take it now up to the maximum on this lens, which is 135, you get a very different image from the exact same spot. Now I'm going to explain something called depth of field, which is my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to a lens. Basically, the more telephoto or the higher the focal length is, something shifts when it comes to the picture. Now I want you guys to pay attention to the tripod over here on the right side. I want you guys to pay attention to how that kind of changes the higher the focal length goes. So I'm increasing focal length, increasing. Did you notice how it became blurry at the end? That is depth of field literally in action. And so basically when it comes to depth of field, it's something that means more items when it comes to what the camera is aiming at, more distance is in focus. So I'm gonna try something now. I'm gonna go in on this, and I'm gonna focus on this lens that we have here at the table. Do you see how the background is so blurred out? But if I was on a normal lens and I focused on this thing on the table over there, the little lens, a little bit of the back, like the box, you know, the screwdriver, these items are still in focus, yet when I go higher up on the focal length and I focus on the lens, they lost that focus. So what depth of field means is that the higher the focal length is, the less things become in focus and the more shallow or narrow the actual depth of field becomes, okay? I'm gonna demonstrate this now just through this quick little online simulator thing, okay? Okay, I don't know why it's being annoying. Cool. So look at this, you know, little cartoon women right here, and look at how the background is very blurred out. Here on the setting, it says 85, okay? Now I'm gonna take that a little bit back, and the more I make it wide, the more the background becomes in focus. And the more I go telephoto, the more out of focus it becomes, okay? Even like notice at the end, this little part right here of her hair, even that became out of focus, even a little bit of her ears. It's very interesting how depth of field works. So, oh look, see now her ears and her hair is, yeah. So I'm gonna try to show you that this just like, okay, how that kind of changes when it comes to the distance of our subject when it comes to the camera. Basically, let's say this is our camera person right here, and this is our subject. Let's go for a neat little 50. All right, so this is 50 millimeter. This is our camera person, and this is our subject. Now look at this little area here. The farther we go back, the more depth of field there actually is, which is super interesting. But the closer we are, look at how it just decreases right there. The more shallow and shallow in the end, it barely even covers our whole like density. It's creepy. So let's try to do the same thing here. Let's say we placed her over here, and we started increasing our focal length. You see how dramatically that impacts what's in focus? With the widest we have here, which is 24 millimeter, so much is in focus. And we can play with that more when it comes to the distance, of course. The next thing we need to talk about when it comes to a lens is the aperture or iris or f-stop. Okay, these all mean the same exact thing. And so what it does mean is that there is a little ring on the inside of the camera, on the inside of the lens, which closes and opens, allowing more light or less light to enter and hit the sensor. Okay? And that's literally what it controls. Now I'm going to show you guys on this DSLR. Okay, I'm going to turn it on. And basically, you guys can see the menus on it. Now, on the bottom, right near the middle, you see that 3.5? That is the aperture. Okay, now the lights are shining right in the camera, and it's obviously too bright. It's overexposed. It's a very bad image. So what we're going to do is close that iris until we have something that's much better. Now, of course, because there's still lights, it's going to look really bad, but you can see how the light changes and how the image changes based on the aperture. Now, there is a counter to this that's very interesting for you guys as well, which is depth of field, once again. So basically, the idea is the more closed that the iris is, the more depth of field you will have. Okay, wait, let me explain it again with our image right here. Can we change to the header? All right, so I want you guys to pay attention very well to the screwdriver, okay, right here. Keep your eyes on this piece and look at what happens when I close the iris. Do you see how it became in focus? I don't know if you guys can tell, but like look at here how it was blurred out, and then here it slowly becomes more and more in focus. And so the counter is also true. So let's say you guys have to kind of like do a little bit of math when it comes to this just to kind of figure it out. So let's say I want a telephoto lens, but I want to capture more things in focus. So what I'm going to have to do is close the aperture, close the iris, and add more light. Okay? Now let's say I want the opposite. If I want a wide shot with a wide angle lens, but I wanted less depth of field to kind of focus more on one piece or very narrow or shallow depth of field, I will have to open the iris as much as I can. And yeah, so let me go demonstrate. Okay, so let's kind of go for example, over here. Okay, I'm just going to close it a little bit just so it's visible. Yep. Still not enough. Okay, so I'm going to focus on the box. Okay, so now I'm currently focused on the one that's closer to the camera. All right? And if I close, they both become in focus eventually. Now, if I wanted to... Wait, كيف بدي أعملها
تعمل wide angle.
Wide, yeah.
أقرب فيك على هون.
Yeah.
وعمول shallow depth of field.
So, I have my wide angle lens. Okay, I'm closer to my subject, which is right here, let's say. And the more close it is, okay, so let's say I want to isolate this piece as much as I can from the background, okay? So what I'm gonna do is open the iris as much as possible. Now I'm gonna just make the ISO really low. And I can barely see. Okay. There you go. So now the lens, this piece right here, is more in focus than anything else in the frame because I opened the iris as much as I possibly could. Okay?
Like not evident enough. قرب أكتر.
قرب أكتر يلا.
Change the focus. It's not in focus. Okay, now you're talking.
Okay, great. So now I'm currently at an 18, which is the lowest focal length. 18?
Millimeter.
18 millimeter, which is the lowest I could possibly go on this camera. And I open the iris as much as possible to isolate this piece right here from the background. Okay, so we have a very shallow depth of field just right here. Okay? This basically over here, we're at 18, which is the widest possible focal length that we have. And the iris is as open as possible. And we still managed, we got closer, of course, to this piece, but we managed to separate this from the background through depth of field. So the item, the distance that's in focus is probably like over here-ish. Okay? Does that sound good? Great. Okay. So to summarize what we just talked about when it comes to aperture, it's how much light goes into the camera and hits the sensor. And also when it comes to depth of field, the more open the iris is, the less depth of field and the more isolated the item in focus becomes. Okay? And so the more closed the iris is, the more depth of field that we have, the more things will be in focus. Perfect. Let's move on. Basically, the next thing that we're going to talk about now is shutter speed, okay? And what shutter speed is, it's that sound that you hear when you take a picture on the camera. That is the shutter, okay? So I'm going to show you guys something now, just very quickly. I'm going to make the shutter speed really, really fast. Now listen to this. You heard that? Okay, now I'm going to make it really slow. You see? It's a very small difference, but it means a lot because that kind of controls how long the sensor is exposed to light. Now, it kind of looks like at first that you're just looking at making the image brighter or darker, but what's actually happening is you're changing the motion, how it's going to look on the actual camera and the image that you captured. Basically, the faster the shutter is, the less motion blur you have. And the slower the shutter is, the more motion blur you'll end up with. So another thing that you guys need to understand about shutter speed is that when you want to shoot video, you can't go less than 1/30, but it's very important to keep a standard because there has been a standard that was established a very long time ago when it comes to shutter speed so that it would be double the frame rate. Now here, I'm going to explain frame rate in a sec, but just make sure that your shutter speed is generally or typically 50, okay? And unless you're in like America or, you know, places where they use NTSC, then you would go for 60, all right? I'll explain more in a second, but that's basically the gist of it, okay? Cool. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the next component of the sensor and something that's very important for you to understand what a sensor actually is to kind of compare it where before we had digital cameras, we had film cameras. And so the sensor is kind of like the digital replacement of a piece of film. And so before, as everything does, it has a standard, which is the film reel. People used to shoot on 35 millimeter piece of film. Don't confuse 35 millimeter of sensor and film with a 35 millimeter of the lens, okay? It's very important to understand the distinction. But for now, I'm only talking about sensor, okay? So 35 millimeter is the size of the piece of film, which is now replicated in the sensor. But not every camera has that size of a sensor. Okay, so here we have the 7D that I've been showing you guys this whole time, and here we have the 5D. Okay, I have the same 50mm lens installed on both of these cameras, but we're getting something different. This over here is the 7D, okay? And it's perfectly normal. It's like it's always has been. And yet, when we compare it to the 5D, which also has a 50mm lens, we are seeing more. Why is that the case? It's because the 5D has a 35mm sensor and the 7D has an APS-C sensor. Basically what that means is that the sensor of the 7D is smaller than the standard, and that's why there is less data, there is less things that are in the frame that are captured than the 5D, which has a full frame or 35mm sensor. So what happens with this is that APS-C image sensors, which are smaller, come with a crop factor compared to the full frame. And that's kind of what you guys were seeing between the 7D and the 5D, that once again, both had 50mm lenses installed on them just now. Okay? Moving on. Another thing that you can do when it comes to the sensor is there's a setting called ISO. Now this somehow is the thing that most people are familiar with when they've ever used the camera. They come and they say, oh yeah, ISO to make the image brighter. But what happens is ISO is actually a digital setting that you can increase. It's not natural light. It's like you put your image on an image editor and you increase the brightness. So what happens is, I'm going to show you now on the 7D, okay? Over here, I have the aperture at 1.4 and the ISO at 320. Okay, now I'm going to do something. I'm going to increase the ISO to the very maximum, which is 16K, and I'm going to take the iris down as much as I can to 16. Now, I want you guys to look closely at the shadowed area, and now you can see a little bit of like a flicker or noise, things that are moving there, just annoying pixels, which were not present if we were doing the opposite, okay? So I'm going back to normal now. I'm not sure, I don't think you guys can see anything. And that's pretty much because ISO can lead to some very bad image quality when you think that the image depends on it or you want to make something brighter. So what you actually need is more light rather than increase the ISO. Personally for me, I would never go over like 2000, that's like the maximum I would go for, and even then that's still not good. Like 1600 is, you know, just enough to get anything that you want. If it's not working there, you need to add more light or open the iris. Okay? Cool. Let's go, let's move on. Okay, and finally we have the storage medium, which is basically where all that you have recorded, all the stuff that you have done on this camera, where all of it stays. And so, like I told you, SD cards, hard drives, you know, before, of course, the film reel itself, and very much is dependent on the camera that you have. So there are so many that you guys can look at, like I showed you before, the SD card and the S/S, but there are also flash cards, tape, SSDs, and sometimes even you can use an external recorder to record directly on like a computer or a hard drive or something. It's very simple stuff. So, and now we have the viewfinder. This piece right here is the viewfinder. All right, it's very nice and pretty. You look through it, and for DSLRs, it has a mirror built inside so that you can see directly what's coming out of the lens. Okay, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Besides a viewfinder, which is like this one here, you look through it and you can see, you also have little monitors. Okay, now sometimes, you know, actually most of the time, just the monitor that comes built into the camera is not enough. So you'll want something to connect it so you can see your image and add more tools to it, or maybe you want to connect it so that the director or anyone else on set besides the cinematographer can actually see the frame. Okay? So how you can connect this is through BNC cables, SDI, HDMI, and you just have many different options for them. All right? And moving on. Frame size. Okay, so when we want to talk about frame size, it's something that's kind of important when it comes to digital filmmaking, which is exactly what we're talking about. Okay? So I'm going to start because what we record with most of the time and what we watch is 1080p. Okay, it's full HD. But before, when we had SD, when we had smaller TVs and screens and whatever, they were 480p, 720p, and now we're actually boosting really, really far ahead. So we have 2K, 3K, 4K. The standard kind of when it comes to 4K is called UHD, which is ultra high definition. It goes 3840 and 2160. Okay? And yeah, that's pretty much it. Cool. Next, we have aspect ratio, which is very important to me personally. Basically, if you guys have watched one of those older TVs or you had like an old TV when you were younger or whatever, that TV had an aspect ratio of 4:3. What is aspect ratio? Well, basically what it is just like the width compared to the height of the screen. Okay? So 4:3, that's basically when you put them on top of each other, the fraction that you end up with. Now at the moment our standard is widescreen HD TV, which is 16:9. What happens is we actually have these on all of our monitors, laptops, TVs, phones. That is the standard of what we use now. But, and I know you guys are gonna love this, but the thing is, when we watch movies in the theater or at home or on Netflix or whatever, I'm sure you people have noticed something that's like black bars. So a lot of people have actually literally come to me and put black bars on top of 16:9 footage that they took with a 7D and told me now it looks cinematic. Okay? But what's happening is when Hollywood or, filmmakers or whatever, when they have something that's like black bars on the top and the bottom of the screen, it's not that they put black bars on video, it's that the camera itself captured a different aspect ratio. That instead of removing from the top and the bottom, the camera actually captured more on the left and the right. Okay? And so that's how we end up with cinematic aspect ratio. So we have two. We have 1.81 to 1 and 2.35 to 1. 2.35 to 1 being the widest. All right? Cool. So frame rate basically is what we use to kind of synchronize the image that we're seeing to kind of turn them into video. Okay? And so we have different standards when it comes to how fast we see frames per every second to kind of simulate the motion of all the things that we're seeing. The three standards that we need to know of. Film, as in literally film, like film reels when they used to shoot films on them before, is 24 frames per second. Okay? Now we have something that's more complicated. Okay? We have PAL and NTSC. Okay? The world kind of was split on this for some reason, where the whole world was 25 frames per second when it came to TV, DVDs, radio, stuff like that. Everyone had decided on the standard of 25 frames per second. And then North America showed up and they were like, you know what, let's make our own standard. 30! And it was really annoying, but it's actually even 29.97 frames per second, not even exactly 30. Americans can't do anything right. So it's just important to note down these three things, okay? So when you want to shoot film, it would be 24 frames per second. When you want to shoot something for TV in where we live and most of the world, we're going under PAL. So we go 25 frames per second. And North America and like Japan and wherever, they go for NTSC, which is 30. All right? Now, there is a different thing when it comes to frame rate, all right? Before that, okay. There is a different thing I want you guys to understand when it comes to frame rate, which is slow motion. Now, how many times has each one of you guys put up a video that you had in Windows Live Movie Maker and put the speed on 50 and was like, wow, slow motion. So you actually need to have like stable, proper slow motion in your films or videos. You need to increase the frame rate. So what you do is, if I want to slow down a video by 50%, I would record at double the frame rate. Mathematics, I know. But so let's say nahna we're at PAL, okay? 25 frames per second is the standard. To get proper slow motion, I'll shoot at 50 frames per second and then play that video on half speed to get 25 frames like on each second that I recorded. Does that make sense? Probably not, but that's okay. Let's move on. So I'm sure any of you that have a TV or a PlayStation or whatever have seen 1080p and 1080i, okay? So I want you guys to understand, first of all, P stands for progressive and I stands for interlaced. How TV and how like video was spread before and shared, not like social media shared, like literally shared, was through an interlaced kind of method. It's very weird to understand, but what they do is they take a line, they skip a line, they take a line, they skip a line, like, okay? And then they would do kind of the opposite on the other lines, and then they would merge them together. Progressive just kind of takes the whole image on its own and ignores all of that shit, okay?
So I'm going to be explaining what a timecode is. A timecode is not the same thing as a counter. A timecode is a very specific and very unique time stamp or ID that is imprinted in a video signal. It is a standard set by the SMPTE, which stands for the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. This is a society that puts forth standards that everyone uses so that we won't have chaos in the industry. So, if one camera is counting in one way and another camera is counting in another way with another standard, then we won't have good communication between these two devices and nothing will work. So, the standard for time counting in video, the timestamp that we use, is called a timecode, and it is made up of frames, which is very dependent on the number of frames per second at which you're shooting at. So if we're using a time base of 24 frames per second, that's what we shot at, these numbers will not go past 23. Why? Because 0 is counted as part of the sequence. 0 is the beginning frame. 23 is the last frame. That makes up 24 frames. But if my base time code was at 25, then 24 would be my last count, and 0 my first. So 24 to 0, that's 25 frames. Next we have the seconds. As you well know, there are 60 seconds in a minute, so this number will not go beyond 60. Same thing with minutes. We have 60 minutes in an hour. So once we move past 59 minutes, 59 seconds, and 24 frames in a 25 frame base timecode, we'll go back to zeros. Next, we have the hours, and they're presented in 24-hour format, so there's nothing beyond 23. Once we get to 23 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds, and 24 frames in a 25 frame base timecode, we shift back to zeros. So if my time base was 24 frames per second, and I move on, notice how at 23, rather than 24 as in under the 25 frame base timecode, will change back to zeros. Now, why is timecode important to know? Because when we're working in a digital world, this timecode becomes much more significant than you can ever imagine. Every clip will have to have its own unique name and its own unique timecode base. It can be synchronized with other clips from other cameras or maybe audio files that have the same timecode if they're shooting exactly and recording exactly at the same time, and only if they're synchronized together but by what we call a timecode generator. But for all intents and purposes, softwares like Adobe Premiere or DaVinci will require these timecodes to be able to tell where I started my clip. Let's say I cut it from here. I'll remove all of these and ended it here. So I'm gonna expand this and just place a cut right here just to illustrate what I'm trying to show you. And I'm gonna tell Premiere to actually use the media timecode with this one as well. So now it's taking the timecode of the clip itself. Notice we're at 13, 32, 31, 14. My last clip on this frame, my last timecode on this frame is 13, 32, 35, 17. The cut I made here, although there's a big gap between them now, is the continuation of exactly where I ended there. This is how software deals with these edits and how you cut things together.
Now we're going to talk about some different shot types, okay? Because when you want to actually construct a scene or you want to kind of take a shot, you have to understand what are the different types of shots that you can take, okay? So let me show you guys this website, this very nice article that we have. Go for it. Okay? And this kind of shows you the different shots that you guys can frame on your characters or your subjects. Okay? So I think Tony actually taught you guys these in class, so I'm not going to take too much time with them. Let's go from let's go from close to far away. So we start with this extreme close-up, which is super, super close on the face. Like we can't even see the whole face, just like the eyes and the nose. And it kind of has like this like high focal length kind of look. You know, whatever helps you tell your story. And the next we have the close-up, which I highly urge you guys to experiment with because most LAU films don't have any close-ups, which is heartbreaking. But yeah, this is, it is what it is. And it kind of just, oh, what the hell did I do? Okay. So it kind of just gets up to like a little bit of the shoulders and most importantly the face, okay? And the medium shot kind of captures like this torso and up kind of look. I think the one that we have here is a little bit wider than I think, but it's okay. The full shot, of course, we can see from top to bottom, explains itself. And the wide shot is where the full body is not even like going from the top to the bottom of the frame. An extreme wide shot is where they're barely even like little piece within the frame. Then we have special stuff, which is like the cowboy shot, because you know you need to see the holster of the gun. That's why it's called a cowboy shot. And the reaction shot, it's pretty much just a close-up. And establishing shot is something that's extremely important because what it does is it's usually the first shot that you have in a scene, and it kind of establishes the space and the location and the main action of what's actually happening in the scene. Over the shoulder is something that you see most of the time when it comes to conversation scenes, because the camera would kind of be placed between like two people who are having a conversation, and so you would see the shoulder of one of the people and the face of the other. And the cutaway shot is like this very quick little insert with a specific action that's like right in the middle of two very normal shots, okay? And that's what we have when it comes to shot types. Now I'm going to show you how to avoid a jump cut. Now that you guys know when it comes to like frame size and you know like how much you want to take of your character, when you want to put multiple shots and multiple angles in one scene, you have to think about how the camera's placed so that you don't make any awkward editing stuff later on. So that's why it's important to plan what you're going to shoot. So let's say I made my shot list and I put, for example, a medium shot, okay? The other shot on the same subject cannot be a medium close-up from the same angle because it's going to look like a jump cut where it looks like a mistake rather than extra storytelling, if that makes any sense. We'll show you a video later because the one that we have here on the slides isn't that good, personally. But I'll explain later how it actually goes. And next, let's go to the slides. Okay, great. So this is a very, very important rule when it comes to filmmaking, okay? And I want you guys to take a good look at what this chart actually says, okay? So whenever you have any kind of action, and for the sake of argument, we're just gonna go for two people standing in front of each other and talking, you create an invisible line, okay? And what happens is, here at camera A, which would be our wide or establishing shot, this kind of establishes that blue is on the left and red is on the right. So when you want to take the other shots of the same scene, the same action, the same characters, blue has to stay on the left and red has to stay on the right. So that's how we create our line, which is literally going from blue to red. So if I wanted a shot on blue, I would take it from cam B, where you see blue stays on the left, red stays on the right, and C, where blue is on the left, red is on the right. Now, camera D is when the rule breaks. Okay, we crossed the line. And I know we love breaking rules, but it's very important to understand why you would want to break this rule first. It has to kind of signify a shift and also not go back to any of the previous shots, or you're going to have some very bad editing errors, such as look here. So if I went from C to D, where they're in the same position, the both of them, that's going to look extremely awkward. Now, to demonstrate that, I want to go and I'm going to get my friends here and we're going to actually show it to you live مثل ما هي. Okay? So what's going to happen now is that these two are having a conversation and we have 3 shots on them. Our wide, which is over there. We have over the shoulder on Aday and over the shoulder on Reem. Okay? Now I'm going to show you guys how these cut together. Reem and Aday, please have a conversation. Now look at what happens when we put this camera over here. Please, Sabina, I'm so sorry. Okay, so now this was the line, and all of our shots were from here, from this side, and now we just crossed it. So, frame all day like before. I'm in the shot. I'm in the shot. Okay. So now we're gonna go to back to this one over here. Talk, guys. So, did you guys spot the problem here? We have a shot on Aday and we have a shot on Reem, yet when we're cutting back and forth between them, there's something that's really off about it because they're both on the same side and it's very, very confusing. Okay? So we're going to go back to this wide. I'm going to kind of explain this in a different example that I love. I swear, guys, this is the last thing I'm going to say. Why this rule is really important. Thank you, Sabina. Why this rule is really important is basically because let's say you're shooting a football match, okay? And so we have Team A and Team B. Okay, let's go red, blue. So Team Red, their goal is over here. I mean, they gotta shoot over here. Sorry, I suck at sports. They gotta shoot over here. Team Blue has to shoot over here. So Team Blue naturally is running this way, and Team Red is running that way. If there was a camera on this side, let's say the normal camera, so we have Team Blue is running. So let's say from your perspective over there, Team Blue is running to the left. Team Red is running to the right. If I had a camera from over here and I captured the match, the same matches, the same everything, it's gonna look like, when we put it in editing, because it's gonna look like you are going to score in your own goal. And that's stupid. And it's gonna look like you are going to go score in your own goal. They're gonna be like, hey, why is Red going left? So, to summarize that, think about your shots. Think about where you place the camera. And it's a habit for me, when I want to make a list, like a shot list, I always draw like little storyboards and stickmen for it, just to be sure how the shot is going to look. And that way, I ensure I don't make a mess out of myself when it comes to editing. And that's it. We're done. Thank you guys for paying attention so long, and I'm sorry to give you such a huge headache. Don't forget, you can text me any questions that you have, and I'm here for it. Okay? Thank you.